Hi there, I hope that you're doing well. My name is Alina, I'm sleep coach, and this is my Sleep Talks channel. Today will be a slightly different episode because I'm going to answer a few questions from my followers. And just before I start, I just want to say that this is not a medical or any professional advice. It is purely informational. So yeah, and also another note, if you feel like you're struggling, so you can always reach out either in comments, write your questions. I will try to reply to all of them. But if you feel like you need some private one-on-one session, you can anytime reach me out and we can schedule a session. So let's begin. So the first question I got from Jake, and I basically the questions I slightly shortened because they were like too long, so just keep it short and just to get the essence of the question. Okay, so Jake writes, I've basically been free from sleep struggle for over 3 months, but I've experienced some anxiety in the last few days, which has built to a climax last night, resulting in little sleep. One would think that after all the time I've spent learning, I wouldn't be back in this place, but here I am feeling anxious, agitated, and tired. The thing is, before my anxiety was about a single thought, such as what if I don't sleep again? This can easily be dispelled as you just tell yourself that this is impossible and it disarms the thought. My new anxiety is the result of being anxious about becoming anxious and how this will affect my sleep. I'm very close to giving in and getting a prescription for sleeping pills. As this is a new anxiety and I don't know how to tackle it, so any thoughts on this would be welcome. Thank you for reading. Okay, thanks Jake for sharing with me your story and the question. And first I want to say that the fact that you've been sleeping for 3 months relatively well, this is a great sign. And there is actually no mystery why you have another kind of like pit or like speed bump. I also, in my experience, I also had the same situation. I've slept 4 months perfectly, and then I hit another speed bump, another period of time when I started sleeping less. And there is nothing weird about it, because if you think insomnia is basically a learned fear of not sleeping. And that fear is not that easy to kind of unlearn, but it is definitely possible. And since it is a fear, and our brain tries to do everything to protect us because it thinks that not sleeping is some sort of a danger, and it launches all sorts of automatic reactions to keep us safe. So that anxiety, those worrisome thoughts is just a part of same old safety mechanism that is launched by our brain. And when we start sleeping for some time and we think we are not fearing that much, our brain is kind of like in a way somehow like satisfied. It doesn't see any danger, but it still processes that kind of like this fear, the trauma of not sleeping, and it can be slightly more reactive or more sensitive to any sleep disruption. So the fact that you've been sleeping well for some time, and now you had just one night when you had maybe just fleeting thought or something like this, or just minor sleep disturbance, which can happen to anyone. But that kind of disturbance tricked the brain in believing that there is again some sort of a threat that it has to protect you from. And brain just tries to catch your attention. It's simply what it does. It always comes up with the worst news possible, comes up with different catastrophic scenarios just to keep your attention on that problem because it wants you to solve it as soon as possible. But as we know, with sleep cannot be controlled. You cannot intentionally fall asleep. So usually this kind of conflict between our brain trying to get that control and sleep not being able to be controlled. This creates this kind of paradoxical situation that it again tries to protect us from something that isn't really dangerous. So it's really good to realize that this is just a function of our brain. That's how it works. It just always tries to catch your attention. And since before it was there was a thought that, okay, what if I don't sleep tonight? And then you kind of like learned that this thought is, you don't need to believe it, and your brain start like can desensitize to this thought. Then it tries to come up with a new thought that will catch your attention. So just know for now that this is normal. That's how brain works, and it will always inject little by little some sort of like efforts or attempts to problem solve your sleep. And anxious about anxious. This is very common. Another kind of like paradoxical loop that we can get into, because we are afraid of getting anxious, and the fact that we are afraid of it, we become even more anxious. So basically it is the same false kind of like not real threat that our brain thinks as real. But in reality, anxiety, no matter how unpleasant it feels, it cannot really harm you. So yes, we need to again apply the same approach as we apply to sleep. The same approach can be applied to anxiety. We just keep teaching our brain that there is nothing to be feared about anxiety, and let it just be. And without us trying to stop anxiety dismisses on its own. Okay, there was one more thing I thought was worth discussing, and okay, you also said this is new anxiety. It just feels now that this is a new anxiety, but in reality it is the same old mechanism that our brain triggers whenever it feels threatened. It is not new, it's just the object of that anxiety changed. Before it was that kind of like, what if I don't sleep? But now it is changed to something else. And the more you try to solve each and every thought like this, your brain will always come up with something. But just when you accept that your brain will come up with these kind of like crazy attempts to attract your attention, then basically you kind of neutralize it. You neutralize this this behavioral pattern of your brain. Okay, and and you also wrote that you are thinking about like sleeping pills and so on, and of course it's always your decision and always based on consulting with doctor. I just want to let you and everyone who are listening it now just know that no medication, no supplements, nothing external can produce sleep. That's the fact. And the way how medication works is usually that first, of course, some of those sleeping pills, tranquilizers, antidepressants, they do have some sort of like sedating effect. But what is more important here is that when we take some sort of like a remedy or some external pill or whatever, usually what we do is we delegate that power of sleep to something else. So we kind of like basically let that pill take care of sleep, and by this delegation we stop trying. And normally the actual fact that we stop trying is what basically helped sleep to come, not the pill itself, because as you know, like medication over time it just loses its effect. And partially because we start like doubting, like what if this medication will not work anymore or something like this. So just generally it is always good if you decide to take sleep medication, just make it a non-factor, just keep it as prescribed without this kind of experimenting and trialing. Or then if you decide like not to, then just not taking it is also like a good outcome. But just to be mindful of that nothing can actually produce sleep. Okay, with that said, let's move on to the second question. And the question is from Kadir. Okay, hi Ali, hope all is good on your side. Would like to ask you something as an ally. For a longer run, I did not have some particularly bad nights and fear of sleeplessness. But the other night I had restless hours, anxiety peaking, almost at the age of some panicking. I even was not alone, had kids in my room. I was trying to let go, calming myself, accepting that it is what it is, and basically doing all that we are taught in education and ACT. I could calm myself for a short time, but it kept coming back. Funny enough, it was not sleep anxiety, as I'm dealing with it pretty okay lately. This was something coming from nowhere, arousing me, making me restless. I would connect that if it was prior Monday or some business task anxiety, but it had none of it. Just a normal weekend day. Did you have something similar? I got check-in pretty, although I thought that I mastered acceptance as key tool to calm myself and rest in peace. Cheers. Okay, you probably see some sort of like similarity with the first question, and this actually shows how common this kind of like issue is. So there's nothing unusual with your journey, with the recovery journey. It's all the same. And yes, so just to know that when we are healing from that fear, because basically we learned that not sleeping is dangerous, so it's somehow in some way it's some sort of like psychological trauma, and the trauma heals, but it takes time. But when it's still a process of healing, our brain tends to be more sensitive to any possible sleep disturbances. And there are so many things that can affect our sleep. So it can be also highly alerted state, or for example, I don't know, we just become more vigilant, or anything that can disrupt sleep. But it is what that disruption or what that state means to us that can kind of like initiate another insomnia bout. And it's really good to know that when sometimes our brain tends to be more vigilant than usually, and this is normal because this is a way how brain is always trying to keep us safe. It is this safety machine is running all the time. Basically, we are not even realizing it, but it's always there. And so yes, first of all, again, realize that there is nothing unusual. It's just another speed bump that is starting, a part of a learning process, because with every speed bump you learn something. You learn something about yourself, you learn how to approach your fear, and next time you again start sleeping better, you will be more kind of armed or more knowledgeable of things that can happen. So when we take each kind of speed bump not as something highly undesirable, but something that can actually moves us further towards the recovery, things change because we stopped fearing any sleep disruption. And sleep disruption can happen. It can happen with anyone, even person with no sleep problems. But once we change our attitude towards that sleep disruption and it stops being something abnormal, and in fact it will become normal, then our brain will stop eventually triggering it, because when things are normal, our brain does not react. It is only when there is something unusual or something, that's when our brain, okay, I need to keep an eye on that, and this is why it increases the hypervigilance, hyperarousal that prevents sleep from happening. And what else was there? I could calm myself for a short time, but it kept coming back. In this kind of like sentence, I feel a little bit of that there is still a little bit of that letting go part still has to be done, because when we approach something, especially when we are working without anxiety, with our fear, in a way that it's something highly undesirable and we want to get rid of it, and anything that we do with that intent, it usually backfires. It can be even the best practices ever, such as acceptance. When we are trying to accept something on surface, kind of like, okay, I'm accepting it now, but deep inside you're still holding on that desire to control it. This is when it will not really work, because your thoughts or your actions and your intentions do not align. But when we do the acceptance with really true acceptance, when we let things be, while reminding ourselves that we are actually safe, because anxiety, no matter how unpleasant it is nothing that can harm you. So when we do that, our brain slowly learns that there is nothing to fear. So just being generally mindful of that kind of intentions. Even the best tools ever can turn into an effort when we have different intention, when we have intention to control it. And there is, like you also mentioned, Kadir, ACT, which is, I guess, stands for Acceptance Commitment Therapy. It's basically built on the premise that the more you accept things, then this is how, like, the way towards like freeing anxiety. Very simplified version, of course, but ACT is a great kind of tool. Acceptance, I heavily use it in coaching, and I heavily used it on myself. But ACT has its limitations, as any other tool. It has its limitations, and its limitations, this one. When we try to accept something that we don't fully understand, acceptance can come very hard. Because when we say, like, okay, I'm feeling like super scared, and then someone tells you, oh, well, just accept it. And then you start thinking, okay, but what am I actually accepting here? So our brain doesn't really buy it, because it doesn't know what we are accepting. So this is why acceptance, together with education, knowing that there is everything, like there is nothing wrong with you, there is no actual danger, it works really well. And sometimes also acceptance can be too kind of pushy, because when you feel like, okay, I have to accept, I have to, let it go. And sometimes this kind of have to, this kind of pressure on ourselves translates into more anxiety. So just be mindful of that. So in general, ACT is a good tool, but we need to realize that at some point we need to see when some tools are not really working in our favor. And generally with acceptance or any sort of emotions are the way how our body communicates with us. So when we feel, when our brain feels threatened or something, it sends us signals, and emotions are those signals. So these emotions are not harmful in itself, or they are not actually there to get you. It's just they are here to deliver a message. So when we close our ears and we try to not have them, not feel any anxiety, it always makes that feeling, that emotion only increase more. So yes, letting things be, accepting, taking everything that comes is always the way. So just to get a little bit more practical here. Okay, so what can be done in this situation? So first, we need to understand that there's nothing unusual about the situations. It's another speed bump that happened, and the fact that it feels now slightly differently does not mean that it's actually something different reason or something like this. Our brain just find another kind of object to focus its safety mechanism on, and work with it just exactly as you worked with original fear or insomnia. When we have strong emotions, when we are overwhelmed and acceptance comes very hard, there are a few things that you can do, like with this kind of emotions or thoughts. It doesn't matter. Usually they're all kind of connected. It's just like the whole state of being highly alerted. And working with them is built on the approach of non-resistance. So if when emotions get too strong, when it's like you cannot just simply just brush it off and focus on something else, then it's really good to let them happen to you, because imagining they are waves, and they're just coming to you, and just willingly going into that wave and experiencing everything that is that wave brings to you. Another approach could be that you take a thought that creates that emotion, because behind every emotion there is a thought, and you just try to decompose it, try to prove it wrong, because most of the time when the threat is perceived, when threat is not real, those thoughts are not actually, we cannot always trust those thoughts. So just you decompose that thought. It's just, is it really true? If they say okay, if you don't sleep or today, or if you will feel nervous, now, then you will have horrible day tomorrow. Then imagine or think about the in the past when this thought was not true, and just try to disprove it or find the some logical explanation to the thought. Or you just can say something, okay, I will worry about it later, and then assign some certain time during the day when you will just like let yourself experience everything like that anxiety brings. And the last note here is that anxiety does, like it feels not pleasant, of course. But the thing is that I found in my practice as well that sleep and anxiety, they can coexist. So if you feel anxiety, that does not necessarily mean that you will not be sleeping. And this can be actually really kind of like relieving fact, because mostly people turn anxiety into an enemy. But anxiety is not an enemy. It's just like, the language, how our body, how our brain communicates with us, but it's never an enemy. So when we see that while we are anxious, but we can still, sleep can still come. It doesn't mean that we can force it, we can force sleep or anything, but just knowing that anxiety does not necessarily mean sleepless night. Okay, so I think this is all for now. I hope that this answered the questions, especially for those who send them to me in the first place. And I also hope that some of you who also found themselves in a similar situation as Jake and Kadir also got some insights, some energy, motivation to keep working on your fear, keep staying on that path of learning, accepting, experiencing it, and teaching our brain that there is nothing to be feared. So in general, if you have any further questions or anything, you can write in comments, or you can send me a direct message on my Instagram. All the links will be attached in the description, as well as you can reach me out also in my via my email, and I will also put it there. So for now, thank you very much for listening, and have a nice day.